So welcome back, everyone. We have the session on journey to CFO. We have I've interacted with Sinohe before, and I've moderated him on one of these conversations. I've loved this. I'm super excited about it as well. Rajiv, over to you, and welcome Joy to the uh, summit as well.
Thanks, Nivas. Hello, everyone. My name is Rajiv, one of the co-founders of Spendflo, and I'm extremely happy to have Joy and Sinohe with me on the panel today. So, all of you might be wondering, what is this journey to CFO and why? How is it related to the Optimized Summit? Right. At Spendflo, we believe in paying it forward to the finance community, and we wanted to have a session where we have experts coming and talking about their journey, where finance leaders can actually learn practically on how to become a CFO. And we see it as a strong paid forward initiative from Spendflow side. And we couldn't think about better people than Sinohe and Joy to come and talk about this. So without much ado, I want to let Sinohe and Joy introduce themselves. So Sinohe, do you want to kickstart introducing yourself first?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having us. Excited for the conversation. My name is Sinohe Terrero. I am the CFO and COO of Envoy. Envoy is a workplace platform company based out of San Francisco, and I've been doing more or less like growth, like high growth tech startups now for about 20 years. So very happy to be with you all.
Yeah. Thanks, Rai. Joy?
Hi, Joy Mbanugo, currently the CFO of a privately held company called Service Rocket down the street from Sinohe in Palo Alto. I've been there since February. Prior to that, I worked at Google. Prior to Google, I was at BlackRock and EY for a long time. So not the 20 years in growth companies, 20 years in big companies. So my path, my hop from Google to a privately held company is very interesting.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've seen both your journeys. I've read a lot about both of you. So I'm very, very excited to be part of the conversation. So let me start with a question to Joy. Right. So, Joy, I was reading one of your interviews and you had mentioned that don't fear rejection. You are just built differently. And I think that resonates a lot for a lot of professionals because people fear rejection and they don't take a lot of chances. So I would love to know a little bit more about your early journey and how did you choose this path to become a CFO? Uh, you're on mute, Joy.
I thought I unmuted myself. Um, my journey started at EY, and I think I have to give a lot of credit to the partners there, particularly the partners in Ohio. I started my career in Cleveland. I'm from Cincinnati. I'll say that probably in every call I join. I'm proud. I'm a proud Midwesterner turned Cali girl, and I think I started my career at a time when before, like, I think when you join a big four firm, you have to do everything. So this was before it was like imposed on you. The partners suggested it and I did it. And so that helped. And then over time, they just helped me move different offices. I went from Cleveland to DC, DC to London, London to San Francisco. And I think somewhere in between London and San Francisco, I decided I wanted to be a CFO, but I didn't know how to get there. And so because of fear of rejection, I didn't say anything to anyone for a long time until I just like blurted it out to someone. And I had a couple of people help me. Now, there have been people along the way who have looked at me and said, well, you know, you're a tax nerd, you're a lawyer, you're this, you spend too much time in capital markets, like you don't have any FP&A experience. And so not rejection per se, but a lot of like, you don't have this, you don't have this, you don't have this. And I just kind of, I've said this in another interview, like, I just didn't care what people had to say. And I went and stalked a lot of CFOs and like stalked their journeys, like controller turned CFO, treasurer turned CFO, investment banker turned CFO. Not a ton of tax nerds. I am a tax nerd. Not a ton of tax nerds turned CFO. But I decided I was going to get the experience that everyone said I was missing, so I wouldn't face that rejection. And if I did face the rejection, it was okay. Like there have been jobs that I wanted that I didn't get, and it's okay. I'm still living.
Awesome, Joy. Because I think more or less people, when we ask for advice, they're going to say, hey, you have to do this to get there. But a lot of people also point out that you don't have this, so you should not be trying for this. Be safe and stay in your comfort zone. So I think it's amazing you took the plunge, and the journey has been very rewarding as well. So I would love to move to Sinohe now and ask you about your journey, Sinohe. What motivated you to become a CFO, and what was your early journey about?
Yes. So when I started university, I actually thought I was going to be a music producer. So my first major was electronic engineering. I had a music production studio. I'm a very proud, representative from the Bronx, New York. And so going into college, I thought I was going to be like the next Sean Puffy Combs. But as it's unfortunately the case with a lot of people with music dreams, like the dream comes to an end, and then you got to figure out what you're going to do when you grow up. And for me, I didn't have a compass. I didn't know up to that point. What I did know was I was very good at numbers. I was very good at stats. And this is before like data science was cool and everyone had a cousin that was a data scientist. I mean, no one knew, like, what do you do with that degree? And so when I went to my professors and I was just trying to get guidance, they were like, "Oh, you should be a statistician." And I was like, "What is that?" And I just didn't know. So the concept, I was good at stats, but the concept of doing that for the rest of my life, I just couldn't put it together. I thought about going into finance, but from where I'm from, you don't know a lot of investment bankers. You don't see that as a path. So I I didn't know, like, how do I end up getting a job if I get this finance degree? What I did know is that every company needed an accountant. And so at that point, I just said, okay, well, let's go into accounting. Sounds safe, good with numbers. We can do this. And to the point of the question of when do you aim for the position, from the minute I switched, I was aiming for the position. What I didn't know is how was I ever going to get there? And my journey has been interesting. I think what I'd say is it's been I've been lucky, and you do need luck, but luck doesn't just appear. You have to make sure that you put yourself in a position to be the recipient of that luck. So throughout my career, when I was at Etsy in 2008, and this is before like startups were crazy, and it was 70 of us in Brooklyn, and I just used to raise my hand. I made sure that people knew that my work was stellar, that my bar was high, and I ended up, again, by putting myself in that position, I was the recipient of the luck of being exposed to certain things. Again, like I ran marketing in that company, which I have no marketing background. I opened up offices in France and Berlin and whatnot. And, for a kid from the Bronx, that in and of itself was amazing, but it just wasn't because I'm lucky. It was because I was there, I was getting up, and I was showing people that I could be, like I could be not only the hardest worker, but my attention to detail was going to be stellar, and, everything else. So I think for me, the path after that was just figuring out how can I stand out, because there's going to be a big crowd of people and you can do very, very good work. But if no one is actually exposed to it, if you don't go to a degree where people are going to want to highlight your work, it's going to be really hard to get on that CFO path. So yeah, that was my path. I mean, again, I've been blessed with luck, but I've been positioning myself to be ready for when luck knocks at the door. I just take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point you make, Sinohe, because a lot of people do not represent their work to everybody in the organization. They're like, okay, I'm doing my job, my work will speak of itself, and probably talk to their managers when the appraisals come and stuff like that. And they think it's a little below themselves to highlight their work to the wider organization. But I honestly believe that if you are doing good work, it should be known to others, primarily because others can also learn and grow from there. Or you also set up a path for yourself to grow into a different position which you aspire for. And without, like you clearly mentioned it, you always had an end in mind before you started. So that is fantastic, and that is very important for professionals in our at least in our space. And again, I have another question for you, Sinohe. So I read in one of your interviews, you said that once someone told me, I look at your face to see if I should be nervous, right? So as a CFO, I think it's a very sometimes it's a very tricky position to be, right? So how do you generally manage that role of being a CFO for an organization to also managing being an organizational leader who has to drive organizational initiatives?
Yeah, that was an engineer that told me that, and I have to tell you, it's something that is ingrained in my head. When as we progress in our career, we look in the mirror and we see the same person we saw the day before. So I still see the staff accountant, I still see the controller, I still see the VP of finance. I don't, I don't know what a CFO looks like. I just see in the mirror and I see Sinohe. But I think sometimes we forget that the people that are engaging with us, this stuff really matters. And to some degree, every word that we say, they parse out. It's like we're the Fed. You know how when the Fed gives their minutes and everybody's like parsing out every single like syllable to see if there's something they should be deciphering. In many ways, when you're an executive, when you're a leader, when you're a C-level person at a company, people are literally looking at everything you do and trying to figure out what it means to them. And for me, I understand that because I work at a startup. I've been working at startups for a long time, and startups sometimes don't do that well. Right? I've been at a startup that ran out of money, and that was not fun. And so people literally are looking to your face to be like, well, if Sanoi's worried, then I should be worried, because if he's worried, then that trickles down. And so I always keep that in mind. I think that, look, a lot in organizations and in cultures generally, I think that trickles down and people mirror what they see, right? And for me, I always say that I am uniquely positioned with understanding every problem in my company, right? If we're running out of money, I know. If the investors are upset, I know. If we, like right now, I'm the CFO and COO, so like people reporting to me. So if we have some kind of people issue, I know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when I get up in the morning, I can't focus on the problems. I have to focus on the solutions, and I have to bring that energy, because again, if people actually saw everything that was on my mind, they would freak out. Because again, there's always something broken in some part of the organization that I just got to dive in and figure out how to fix. And so, yeah, I think it is important for us as leaders to make sure that we are projecting what we want the rest of the organization to be. Now, that doesn't mean I lie to people. I'm a pretty transparent person. I think actually that's one of my superpowers. But at the same time, I just can't. I I don't let them see me sweat, because that's just not good. We need to come in. We need to solve things. We need to make sure that we have the right level of confidence, of energy, because I think that projects down to other folks.
Absolutely. And I think as an org leader, that is the most important thing as executives we need to do, because our energy flows down and it's contagious as well. So, Joy, I have a question for you, right? So, in one of your interviews, again, so we've been reading a lot about both of you. So, there are going to be a bunch of questions from interviews we read. So, this one is like, you mentioned that I don't think people understand the crazy we deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? So, I think that is coming in because of the workload and different stuff that you need to do on a day-to-day basis. But it has come through because of a lot of challenges that you might have faced in your early career as well. So, I'd love to understand, what are the biggest challenges that you faced in your career that led you to a position where you are able to deal with a lot of craziness every day?
Yeah, one, I just want to go back to Sinoe's answer. I think all of that, like, I'm sorry, I wasn't laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's so true. Like, people look at the CFO and they're like, you know, is she smiling? Is she not smiling? And if you join a call unannounced, then people look at you in a weird way. So we do have to kind of like have some sort of poker face, which is hard for me because I laugh a lot and I wear my emotions on my face and on my sleeve, as they say. But Sairaji, going back to your question, I think some of the challenges I faced earlier in my career, or just in my career in general, like even I would say the last 2 years, no offense to any of my former employers, but being under, that'll just be a theme, like underestimated, underpaid, undervalued, underleveled. I remember, so I've speaking of luck, I've been very, very lucky. So I do want to add that. I don't want people to think like, oh, I just woke up and became a CFO. Like, no, this has been a 20-year journey. Very, very lucky, a lot of mentors. And so one of the things that helped me along, and I'll always go back to this, are people from EY, people from BlackRock, people from Google, and other outside mentors who believed in me, so that when that underestimation, undervalue, and all that started nipping in my head, like that imposter syndrome, I'm like, kill that. I was very fortunate to have people send me CFO roles and say, here, apply for this, when I told them I wanted to be a CFO. And one of the, recently, one of the issues I faced was I was telling someone like, hey, I want to be a CFO. And they said to me, what makes you think you can be a CFO? And that was like, I was just taken aback. I was just like, whoa, where is this coming from? Like, had this person looked at like my background? Like, do they know how long I've been working? Maybe I look young to them. I'm not going to say I look young, but some people tell me I look young. I'm like, maybe they don't know how old I am. Maybe they didn't see that I have 4 degrees. Maybe they don't know the companies I worked for, even though we were at a pretty big company. So I've had not a lot, but I've had times where I've had people look at me and be like, you can't do that job. You can't go to treasury. You can't go to controllership. You can't go to FP&A. And I just kind of blocked out the noise, and I relied on my mentors who were so valuable to me. Sought out other Black women CFOs who were just like completely amazing. And I stalked them, and they like gave me such good advice. And, not just Black women, but like I've had really, really, really good mentors, because there are people who will question you every step of the way. And, if you want to go like to the New York rap community, they'll be like, shake it off, shake the haters off. And you have to have that personality, I think, to be in finance. Like, you got to be tough. And so people will challenge you. And so you just have to say, no, I know I'm qualified, and I know what I bring to the table, and know what your superpower is from a finance standpoint. And that's one of the things you can stand on.
If I can add something, once I was overlooked after doing a lot of work and basically getting in organizations to a certain point, and I had a coach at the time, and I said, hey, why is this happening? Like, I've done all the work. It's clear that I'm qualified. And he said something to me. He said, Sinohe, boards are very conservative, and sometimes they want to see that you've been a CFO, even if it was at a bakery, but they want to see that you've done that before. And so from that moment on, I stopped taking it personal, at least myself, because up to that point, I was like, what the hell? There's a lot of things that come into the decision to actually put someone in a CFO seat. And I think sometimes you have to go out and you got to seek that opportunity proactively, because even people that may be with the best intentions to do that, they won't have the power to do it, again, because it's like buying insurance, right? And so that's something that I always tell young professionals just to keep in mind. Like, look, it's very tough, because people don't want to make a mistake on something as critical as the CFO position. Sometimes, you may have to take a step back to take a step forward, because that's the other thing. Sometimes people don't think about that, and what trajectory do they need to do in their own career to make sure they get to the ultimate goal. They get too caught up on like climbing the ladder in a straight path, but life is a curved road, and you got to figure out, okay, sometimes I got to make that left turn.
Awesome. That's so true. And Sarai and Joy, this question is for both of you. We'll start with Joy probably. What is the most rewarding aspect of being a CFO? And
I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I want to add on a small part to it.
Go ahead.
What is something from your personal life that you incorporate in your job every day as well?
Okay, I'll answer the last question first. The one thing I incorporate in my personal life, I love Beyonce. So my team and like the whole company, they're probably tired of me, because I will like make Beyonce references all the time. And so that's one thing, just to keep it light, right? Because like we are talking about EBITDA, cash flow, people like Sinohe mentioned, people issues. I manage people as well. So it's just like there's a lot of heavy stuff inside. I try to bring levity. I, told them I was going to the Beyonce concert. So that personal aspect of my life comes to work with me. The one thing that's been the most rewarding is seeing people on my team like really kick it up a notch. So like I said, it's a team that I don't want to say inherited, but a team that was already in place. The first time CFO, first time the company had a CFO, the CEO pretty much has done every job, CEO, CTO, COO, CPO. So joining and watching, some of my younger staff be really excited about projects, taking initiative. I always tell them, like, one of you all will take my job. And I'm totally fine with that. And I tell them, I said, I expect one of you to be the CFO eventually. I'm not going to do this forever. So seeing them coming to me with their own projects and their own ideas, that gets me super excited. Like my team, I can't say enough about my team. I even wrote a poem for my controller and posted it on LinkedIn. Like, my team makes me really happy.
Yeah, that's new. So we'll go back and refer that. Sinohe?
I mean, it's hard to follow like someone that wrote a poem for their team. I mean, now I feel a certain way. I gotta like write a rap, like I gotta come up with something, make a beat. I think what I try to bring for my personal life, I try to bring a little bit of levity again, and a little bit. I at least I think I'm funny, but I just try to keep it a little light from that perspective. It's just a personal stuff. I'm also a sci-fi buff, so I talk a lot about sci-fi at work, and I keep up with a lot of technology. I know that we may ask this later. I keep up with a lot of technology. Like I probably know more about large language models than mere mortal should know, but and I am always trying to bring that back to my team and also make sure that they know they're aware of what's the latest and greatest, whether it's a gadget or something. So that's what I bring back to my team. I think in terms of the most important thing that I get out of being a CFO, I would say that it's unblocking things. And maybe another way to say it is enabling things to happen. And that's more from the perspective of someone that's just like wants to get things done than CFO per se. In our organizations, we have different levels of expertise. There are people that absolutely know what they're doing. They're like charge. And then there are people that like to drown in a cup of water, right? And then you enter these meetings and they are there, basically like struggling in a cup of water. And you're just like, look, here's a simple way for us to move forward. And so giving that guidance always makes me feel good because, again, sometimes this morning I had a meeting in which there were 4 people that thought they were aligned, but when I spoke to each of them individually, none of them were. So I literally just put them all into a room and I said, okay, look, I know that everyone is acting like we're aligned, but clearly we're not. So let's come up with a quick action item. Let's have an honest conversation and an honest discussion so that we can get to alignment. And only then did people start actually surfacing some of their frustrations that they've been carrying and walking around with, right? But humans don't like conflict, right? So how do you allow people a safe space to be able to say what is bothering them in order for you to unlock like speed, because inertia is such a thing in our company. So I get a kick out of that. Like, how do I unblock things? How do I get things done? I'm a default to action human, sometimes, to my detriment. But a lot of people aren't, because change is hard. Disruption is hard. So I love seeing that. I love seeing people, again, getting to action.
Oh, that's great perspective, because if we're not moving, we are pretty much, it reflects on everybody else that is around us as well. So once you start moving, giving direction, the team moves along with us. And I think that is very, very rewarding for every executive. And another question to you, Joy. So you worked on one of the largest ERP to ERP migration projects in the country, and probably it's like the you led the treasury tax initiative at Google, and you also streamlined the cash management of a small change of $100 billion. I'm still counting the number of zeros in it, by the way. So would love to know about that experience, and if you can walk us through it, that'll be fantastic for us. You're on mute, Joy.
Yeah, sorry. It was like drinking from a fire hose. So I joined, and so let me take a step back. When I joined Google, my prior experience at EY, particularly DC, London, and BlackRock, was very much treasury, capital markets focused, so financial instruments and cash management. So I had a lot of experience in that. And that's why I got hired into Google. And so when I joined, I thought like, oh, great, I'm coming. I'm going to do all this fancy stuff and fancy structuring. And the first project, like literally, I showed up the first day, and they're like, "Oh, we have this SAP project you need to work on." I said, "Woo! I'm a lawyer. I'm a tax nerd and a capital markets girl. Like I don't do systems." And I was in for a rude awakening because I became a systems person. And it ended up being probably one of the best projects I could work on and super pivotal because I had to learn every entity in the company, because you can't manage cash you can't manage all the cash and not know all the entities that have cash. And so it helped me actually understand Alphabet, I'll say, not even just Google, but understand the entity. And then that project actually was the springboard to me coming out of tax, because, okay, I have all this tax background. I also used to be an auditor. I have a law degree, blah, blah, blah. But the systems piece kind of pushed me over the edge. And so I did great work. Like Sinohe mentioned, like you have to do good work. So it's a little bit of preparation plus luck. I was in the right place at the right time. I literally was walking across the street from one building to another down in Sunnyvale. And someone I worked on the project with said, "Hey, you worked on the treasury project. We want you to work on the big implementation," because the treasury implementation was a precursor to a wider implementation. And that's really what helped me move out of tax completely. I moved completely out of tax into the systems project management controllership team. And that springboard, I had already put in all this work and had all this capital markets treasury experience, but not like I needed kind of a push to get over the edge to move me completely out of tax, because I've been holding on to tax for dear life, because it's my superpower, or was my superpower. So it was a huge project. I think I spent most of my time on systems, and that was important because it got me more focused on, I would say now, what people are calling CFO tech. So like I look at a lot of tools. I'm very interested in like FP&A tools. I use NetSuite now, and my CEO will hack NetSuite. So I think the projects were massive, and yes, managing all the cash was massive. It was more so the changing my mindset from being very narrow, like, oh no, I can't do this because this is what I've always been, to saying, okay, I'm in tech. I need to learn tech. Like, let me just dive in.
Wow, awesome. So my next question is for you. So you were the CFO during the NetBase Quid acquisition. So can you walk us through that journey? It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, so I start by saying that because I'm sure there's a lot of controllers and CFOs of startup companies, and everybody's thinking about landing the plane. That's one of the things that like top of mind for some founders and whatnot. I think, look, companies are bought, they're not sold. So that's the first thing, right? But for us, what was interesting about that particular situation was that we were approached by a public company that shall remain nameless. And we started actually going down the path of a sort of handshake acquisition. And we spent a year working on the partnership. We spent a year basically like making sure that the integrations really worked, that our sales teams were working a little bit together, and everything was going great. A year passed, and we were growing. We had very good technology, but we were a startup. We did not have positive EBITDA. And when the decision makers at the end were figuring out the decision, they basically said no because of the EBITDA issue. And now we were caught in a situation where this thing that we had spent a year aiming towards, it's basically like disintegrated. And at that point, though, we were too far down the path. So we started figuring out, okay, what are we going to do? There were some other, folks that we had basically like told them we weren't interested in speaking while we were on that journey. But then from that point on, we did what is normally done. You go and you do a bake off with a bunch of bankers, and God bless their hearts. It literally all you're doing at that point is figuring out who has the better connections, because they're all. I mean, it's not that complicated of a thing, right? It's literally who knows whom where, in terms of corporate development teams, CEOs and folks that can actually acquire your company or merge into it. And so we picked a banker, and again, God bless their heart, they have like one template that they all use to put together your presentation, and it's the driest banking presentation in the history of dryness. I see them all the time now, and I'm like, oh, I guess they have like a Slack channel where they just send each other the template. But they were great people. I actually have no complaints about the team. The team was awesome. I still talk to them. But we went through the process. I think luckily for us, for Quid, was that we did end up finding someone that really matched a lot of what the company was doing in terms of the technology that it was building, the market that it was addressing. But like everything else, these things are marriages, and most of them fail. They end up in divorces or like terrible situations when it comes to M&A, right? In their case, I think it was a good outcome, because the complementary products, they really worked on putting them together, and actually they're still around and they're still thriving. They actually just changed their name back to Quid, which made me kind of happy, because again, they adopted the next name, but now it's back to the original name. But in terms of the things that are involved for the folks on this call, it's the natural things. Once we identified the company, then we had a lot of late nights doing synergy models and figuring out how these two things were going to be combined, and how is the outlook in a year, what are the redundant areas that clearly come out of a process like this, and then we finalized the deal. So the ending of the story was good, but boy, that first part made it really choppy and made it really questionable. So it was pretty turbulent for a while.
Sure. Awesome. We have a question from the audience. I would love to pose it to Joy. So, what is the biggest difference between being the CFO and a VP or director of finance? And what's the best way to put a ring on it?
So CFO is kind of like, so I have a nickname in the company. One of my nicknames, someone called me the Grinch the other day, but I think they meant that in a nice way. So I didn't take that personally, because I cut the holiday budget. But someone called me the general. And I feel like CFOs and COs, or just C-level executives, have to be like the strategic thinker in the room. And I hate that word strategic thinker because it's overused, but you have to think at a higher level. And when I come down to, like, I'm going to skip VP, but my director of finance, my senior director of finance, like, he's my deputy. And so I go to him, like, I harass him. I'm like, what's EBITDA today? What's this? What's cash flow? What I expect him to know pretty much every KPI from a finance standpoint, whether it's accounting, proper FP&A, or something else. Like, I bill him. So yes, I know it. I have a dashboard. I can go look at it, but I may also ask him, like, okay, if we miss this target, what is EBITDA going to be? So I pepper him every morning. I think I drive him crazy, but he's great. So that's my senior director of finance. I don't technically have a VP of finance, but if I did, it would be a little step higher. So someone kind of leading the team on the finance side, leading the long range planning, leading the changes to our forecast, helping out, maybe one of the things, helping out with the board reports that we have to pull together, which take so much of my team's time. Those are some of the distinctions I would see, but in full disclosure, I do not have a VP of finance.
Okay.
Nor have I ever been one. I just want to be clear, I've never been one either.
Okay. Interesting. I think we have a couple of minutes, so I want to ask a question. I want to pose this question to both of you. So, if you have to give an advice for aspiring finance professionals, okay, what would that be? So, Sinohe, maybe we can start with you.
There was an American Airlines commercial. I think it was in the 90s. I was actually Googling this the other day. And in the commercial, there was a guy named Joe. And the commercial, basically, the premise of the commercial was like they would ask Joe to go to all these terrible places, not terrible places, but like places nobody wanted to go, like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or Omaha, Nebraska. And he would just raise his hand, right? At the end of the commercial, though, they were looking for someone to go to Des Moines or something, and they were looking for Joe, and Joe was gone. Joe was on vacation using the points that he gathered from raising his hands and doing all of the things that other people didn't want to do. And so my advice to young professionals is raise your hand and you will live off the points, because that's been my experience. I've always raised my hand. I've never been afraid to like dive into, like, go into a burning building and come out with a kitty cat. And that has served me well. And I think that you have to be ready to do things outside of your comfort zone, outside of your work scope, if you really want to stand out in a crowd. And that would be my advice for folks that want to really progress in their careers. Like, raise your hand, do things outside of your comfort zone, save the kitty cats.
Awesome. Thanks, Sinohe. Joy?
I won't prolong this or add anything to that. I would say ditto. Like, if someone asks you to take on a challenge, do it, or just do it and then ask for forgiveness. I have someone on my team who loves financial modeling, and he'll come up with his own models, and I absolutely love it. So I won't add too much to what I already said.
Cool. Fantastic. So again, we are on time now. So thanks a lot, Sinohe and Joy, for joining us today. And I really hope the audience got best value out of being part of this conversation. And I really enjoyed it. Hope you also had a good time. So thanks a lot for joining us today.